So back then the hip hop scene was just starting out, but in the UK it was essentially non-existent.
Well, people were absorbing it, and it was that early, like, you know, electro music, electro funk, with those early artists, and, you know, Tommy Boy's the label had a lot of hits out at that time, and Profile Records and Enjoy, and they were starting to come over.
Okay.
And like where I was, like, because I was in these street spots, that's all that like the club wanted to hear. So I just was playing more and more of it. And what was before that was this sort of era, like jazzy funkers music. So I would just be playing more and more hip hop, and suddenly, you know, hip hop is what it was.
Okay. So you started focusing on hip hop at this point?
Yeah, just because of the clubs I was in. That's all everyone wanted to, and the music was just ringing off crazy.
Okay. But back then the radio was not playing hip hop at all.
No, but what was happening over here? We had a great pirate scene.
Exactly.
So what happened with the pirates over here? Like back then, there was no opportunity to get on radio. There was very few legal radio stations, and like virtually just one or two, a handful of shows. So Rodigan had a reggae show. There was another guy with a reggae show on a station called Radio London. There was another soul guy playing, and there was nothing else moving out here. And the pirates were big. What happened with the pirates, and this was what made them so powerful, is that somebody discovered a loophole in the law, that if you had your transmitter to your station on private property, the police couldn't raid it. And because of that, before, everyone else used to put them on tower blocks, like in the projects, put them on the blocks, and the police used to come and just take them away. But when they found this loophole, everyone used to rent roof space up in Crystal Palace, on Parade Street, up in Crystal Palace. It's the highest point in London, and like there we were on air every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for like 2 years, and that's when pirates got a crazy hold.
And like, who were some of the UK artists that started to get their start during that pirate era?
Those sort of super day one guys would be people like London Posse, Moni Love,
Rodney P.
Yeah, those people. They were like first generation people.
Oh, so Moni Love actually started out over here.
No, she's over here. Always had an American accent, but started out over here.
Right, because I remember that she was with Queen Latifah.
Yes.
Early on in the '80s, but she started out over here.
Yes,
first.
yes.
Ah, okay, dope. So you're doing this pirate radio station.
She was living fancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you started out with this pirate radio station. 2 years in, at what point did you start to kind of transition into actual radio?
Okay, so I was on pirate radio, really putting in crazy work on the radio 6 days a week, smashing it down. Like, and you know, we'd be broadcasting from North Peckham Estate, and it was just you just felt the whole of your world was listening to you, man. We're packing out clubs in London, just smashing it down from day one to now. And what kind of happened then, we were just putting in the work, and then suddenly we get this call from a new boss, new manager at Capital, asked us to come in for a meeting. I remember going to that meeting because at that era I was really out there as a DJ, so I remember going in there carrying like a bottle of grape wine called Canai, which everyone used to drink in the parties, and like a spliff in my hand going in for this meeting. And when I got to the building, I thought, I'm doing this so friggin' wrong right now. So I like smartened up my act, did my belt up, tucked in my jacket, and and then started on Capital. And the thing with Capital, that was the biggest station in London, and we had the rap show there on a Friday and a Saturday night, and that was like a real era of hip hop. Like people like Fresh Prince, you know, Will Smith was like smashing it down at that time. That early Run DMC, that Beastie Boys. And it was just an incredible time to be on, man. It was an incredible time to be on.
And this was the first hip-hop radio show in the UK.
There was another cat called Mike Allen who was up at that station during that electro-funk area doing good work. But, he didn't stay.
Okay. Now, at one point, you were somehow a co-owner of Kiss FM?
Yeah, what happened, we set up Kiss as a pirate. So I was on a station called LWR. We was winning with that for years. And then a bunch of DJs got together and set up Kiss FM. We all had to put some money in to get it going. But what happened, when I joined the legal station and Kiss was going for their license, like the boss was saying, like, anyone's got shares in other stations will get the sack. So it's like, Call that a day, baby.
Okay, you let that go.
Yeah.
So
I was, and I didn't want to join Kiss because it was like heavily house music at that time.
Gotcha. So you're at Capital FM.
Yeah, the Kiss wanted me to join. They wanted me to do like a daily show and all that
Yeah.
good stuff like Drive Time, but the music wasn't straight for me. So
Absolutely. So you're at Capital FM doing your show. And how long were you there?
we were up there for 7 years.
7 years.
And we were out there winning. So that was like, yeah, man, there was nothing else moving. We were smashing it down every Friday, every Saturday night. Real big, like, breaking artists. And that was the time, like, from the Run DMC era right up to just to the start of Biggie and Tupac.
Okay. And then at one point you switched over to BBC Radio 1.
Yeah, what happened, so it was up there, and it was a guy called Richard Park from Capital Borders in there. He was like the new manager at the station. He was up there for 7 years, like, having the best time. And then they changed things up at Radio 1. There's new management up there, a guy called Matthew Bannister and Andy Parfitt. And new management is always a good time, man. So they offered us a show up there. Now, initially I said no, because my world was just London. I was just a DJ in London and surrounds, and that all that mattered to me. And Radio 1 had no ratings. It had no ratings in London at all. Like, nobody cared. And so I didn't really know much about that station. But I was doing a gig at a holiday camp miles up in the country, like at Prestatyn. And I remember pulling into the garage, hearing this other DJ coming out of the guy who was working in the garage, the petrol pump guy, listening to Radio 1. And it was like, yo, this guy does not know who I am, doesn't care who I am, but he's listening to this guy on the radio. And that was like something that made me pay attention to Radio 1. So they asked me to join. I joined there as like an independent production company. So that enabled me to bring other people in. So we brought in a reggae show, Chris Goldfinger. We brought in other shows like In Music We Trust and Marianne Hobbs, other bits and pieces like that. But we were up there on a Friday, Saturday, just shutting it down nationwide. And that was at the era of when like Biggie and Tupac was just like took over the streets. And when I joined Radio 1 for my like launch party of the station, of being on the station, like Biggie came over with Craig Mack, Puffy came, Little C's came, and we did a big show just down the road at the Hammersmith Palais as a launch party to Westwood on Radio 1. We're up there for 19 years, like doing incredible. So every like era of hip hop was reflected, and you know, every era of hip hop in those radio terms, like we were part of. And like what was so amazing, it was like part of the one-stop shop that if you came through to see us, so every big act would have to come through to see us, to get on the radio, to freestyle, to interview. And then we had a club popping as well called the Temple. And the thing with the Temple, that was on a Saturday night, so the artists used to come through on the radio, and then we'd go up to the club together and tear down the club. It was just incredible. And that was like our equivalent of a legendary club that Flex used to do called the Tunnel in New York. And you know, one night we used to do these big carnival parties, and one carnival we had Jay-Z perform, Lil Kim perform, Busta Rhymes, and you know, then they all came to the after party, and Wyclef and the Fugees were there, and it was just like, yeah, we were putting it on for the UK. And those clubs are really important to me because I feel, you know, that's part of people's experience of life, man. And like, if you've come to those clubs and been part of that, you know, it can change your outlook on life, man.
So you had this show on Radio 1 for 19 years. And you had some huge names, as you mentioned, came by. Eminem came by.
All the time, man.
Like, that was he came by your show the first time he went to the UK, right?
Yeah, he used to come down every time.
What
with them, like, I got to link him early before he was signed, because John Sector was involved with Paul Rosenberg and introduced me to M. So I was on his records mad early, and you could see this guy was something special.
No, I remember I had the Slim Shady EP before Dre signed him.
Yeah,
and it
exactly.
was like so obvious how good he was.
Yeah. So, but in those early days, he was at his best.
Yeah.
Because he was at his craziest.
Yeah, he didn't
And I
care.
think M, which was high and twisted, was a lot more fun. Yeah, a lot more fun. So yeah, M was incredible. You know, and those freestyles were phenomenal. I mean, for him to come through like that, mad.
I mean, aside from the Eminem freestyles, like, what do you think were some of your greatest, like, hip-hop moments on that show? Because you mentioned Biggie.
Yeah, I think the M thing was special because at the M thing you could see the right. Well, I think when I was up at Capitol, Snoop came through for the first time. Often when artists come through for the first time, it's the most exciting. Like they're in the UK for the first time, everything's new, they're new to the game, they haven't done a million interviews, they're happy and excited to be on, and they're wanting that experience, and they often build a relationship with you which can last because it's not that same old generic stuff.
Yeah.
So it is that case of real, like, excitement, and the freestyles are amazing and the interview is turned up. So yeah, I've been blessed to catch a lot of artists first, and then off the back of that, you've kept those relationships, and that's also helps set you up for other artists in the future.
I mean, any crazy moments you could remember that may have happened off the air?
There was always a load of crazy music. I mean, in those days, we were too much in those days. So quite often, if it was a major artist, like when Biggie would come through, I'd bring a chef in and he'd be cooking in the back. We'd have bottles of champagne on ice overflowing. In those days, there was a lot of weed smoking going on as well, and everyone was just getting turned up. And it was like the conversations weren't like they were on the radio. The conversations were just like this crazy out there. And then the great thing with the Eminem, he did these shows at Milton Keynes for 250,000 people over 3 nights. And we got to DJ at those before he came on, and that's when he brought 50 Cent out when he just signed 50. And that whole 50 Cent G Unit was another era, the Jay-Z era. There was just like, we were just there for every part of the journey. And then we was going over to New York a lot to do shows with Flex. Before we did them with Flex, we did them with Marley Marl, and we used to do them live from WBLS with Marley, and then we used to do them from Marley's crib, House of Hits out in Mount Vernon, broadcast live back. And then we were doing them with Flex from Hot 97, and we did them together for years, and that used to get me to New York once or twice a month to hang out, meet a lot of new people, experience like what Flex was doing. And I think what you got to understand, like, I think Flex is the greatest hip-hop DJ of all time. Like, has defined, as a DJ in this DJ industry, he has defined a hip-hop DJ.
Yeah, I mean, when I got into DJing, that was the DJ that I sort of modeled myself around, just because he was more than just a DJ.
Yeah, he was
a brand. Yes, he had a shoe deal. He had the car shows, and when I look at where I am today, it was like, I didn't just want to be the guy that just spun in the clubs. I wanted to be a bigger business.
Yeah, I think Flex is definitely the greatest DJ. I mean, he's the DJ which made Hot 97 into a hip hop station.
Yep. When
Flex joined, it was a freestyle station. He, single-handedly turned that into a hip hop station. The tunnel was like a defining moment in hip hop for like where the music was at, and one of the greatest clubs of all time. And Flex brought the car game into hip hop. The jewelry game, it just came in, but he brought the car game in.
Yeah.
So I think he was also like his energy of how he rips a party and cracks the mic in a club or on the radio. Yeah, he definitely is a defining moment for it.
Absolutely, Flex does his thing. So you're on the radio, and you have the biggest hip hop radio show in the whole UK. Would you say all of Europe?
I wasn't paying attention to Europe.
Wasn't paying attention. You cared about the UK.
Yeah, I really just did care about UK, baby.
Okay.
Like, that's all I cared about.
You have the biggest radio show in the UK. You got every major US artist coming through on your show. And at one point, you start getting a little bit of criticism that you're not putting on as many UK artists. Is that a safe?
Oh, I would say
safe statement?
I would say that was so true.
Yeah.
I would say that was so true. But what was happening in the UK scene at that moment. And I'm not trying to justify my position, but I was in the clubs, and that's all I cared about, was ripping down the clubs. And that was my playlist, and that was records like DMX, 50 Cent, whatever was popping,
Yeah.
I was playing. And there was this whole movement with a lot of like white UK artists making quite thoughtful, eclectic music.
Mm-hmm.
And really respect it, but I just didn't embrace it, because my lane was in the clubs. I was in the hood parties, ripping it down, doing what I do. And then there was this movement of people like Task Force, great artists, but I couldn't feel their records. I couldn't play them in the club, and so I was blind to them, and they were doing their own thing, so they weren't like reaching out trying to get my attention. So I was leaving them alone, and I tried to get a cat in to like do a mix to reflect it, but yeah, it wasn't really popping, man. You know, I didn't like giving up my time. So like, yeah, I did kind of miss it, because it didn't. I'm not criticizing the music, fam, because I know that music meant a lot to people, but it wasn't connecting and resonating with my target audience.
Yeah.
And that was my audience. My playlist was the club, and those records weren't popping in the club. And I used to check their clubs they used to play at and perform at, and those records weren't working for me. So I did miss a moment of it. And the truth of them, yeah, like, yo, I'm about ripping down the clubs. But it was also at that moment that was also happening a bit in New York, where there was like the raucous, like the Most Defs, Talib Kweli's, and they had the tremendous music out there.
But it wasn't club music.
But it was the divide from what was happening with raucous and
it was
like those type of record shows.
The backpack movement.
The backpack, yeah, what the backpack was, and then the likes of Biggie and the shiny suits of Puffy and the Mace records, and I just went along that route. And so, yeah, some of those cats were mad at me, and it would have been nice if I could have catered for them, but I didn't have an outlet for them.